If you've been keeping up with the headlines recently, you've probably seen this going on, where Jimmy Fallon is under a lot of fire for the toxic workplace and the erratic behavior and the possible abuses or abuse of power that's been happening around his Tonight Show and the staff that's on that show. Now, in terms of how much the internet actually likes Jimmy Fallon, he's been pretty middle of the road. I'm not talking about his ratings when he gets like 3 to 4 million viewers per episode. He's definitely one of the top dogs there. But I'm talking about how much people just on the internet large generally enjoy him. And as far as that goes, he's pretty middle of the road. He is essentially the grape jelly of late night hosts. He's not like the strawberry jelly, which is objectively the best jelly and would be someone like Conan O'Brien up there at the tippy top, but he's also not something like the cherry jelly or the raspberry jelly, which are objectively the worst jellies, and those would be people on the very bottom like James Corden or Ellen DeGeneres. However, this general middle-of-the-road milquetoast people on the internet shrugging their shoulders and saying, yeah, he's fine kind of reputation he has might be coming to an end. And that is because this gigantic report by Rolling Stone dropped called Inside Jimmy Fallon's Tonight Show, 16 staffers allege erratic behavior. And it's a tremendously long report. So we're just going to be picking out the most important parts as we talk about what's going on, why it's so toxic, why everyone seems to have just turned on him on the internet, and what might be really happening here at large. The first part has a bit of an introduction about the Tonight Show and Jimmy Fallon, but then it gets to the real meat and potatoes of it pretty quickly, and says, according to 2 current and 14 former employees, so 16 total, the Tonight Show has been a toxic workplace for years, far outside the boundaries of what's considered normal in a high-pressure world of late-night TV. They say the ugly environment behind the scenes starts at the top with Fallon's erratic behavior and has trickled down to its ever-changing leadership teams, 9 showrunners in the past 9 years, who seemingly don't know how to say no to Jimmy Fallon. Former employees described the Tonight Show as a tense and, quote, pretty glum, unquote, atmosphere, with some alleging they have belittled and intimidated by their bosses, including Jimmy Fallon himself. Employees describe being afraid of Fallon's outbursts and unexpected inconsistent behavior. Many of these staffers voiced their concerns through HR complaints, but the problems at the Tonight Show persisted. Now, right off the bat, I think Rolling Stone is doing a pretty good job of introing their article. They say that they talked to 14 former employees, 2 current employees, all of whom have remained anonymous for fear of retaliation, because of course you don't want to go on as being the guy that trashed Jimmy Fallon, because you will never get another writing job. Why would Seth Meyers hire you if you trashed his good friend Jimmy Fallon? But also, it's very much worth noting that they included the fact that 9 showrunners in 9 years have left. They're not just talking about, oh, these people we talked to that have left the show didn't like it, because of course you're going to have a bias probably against Jimmy Fallon if you just talk to people who have left the show or been fired from the show. But the fact that 9 showrunners in 9 years have left does speak to a potential toxic environment in which people don't want to stick around for a long time because it's simply too much to deal with. Now, I do want to say that 16 people is not very many. If you look at how many people are actually employed by The Tonight Show, the current staff consists of nearly 300 employees, and some have come forward defending The Fallon Show, which we'll talk about that in a few minutes. 16 out of 300 is not that many. You're looking at just under 5%, closer to 4.5%. But it does not stop there. In fact, it gets consistently worse as Rolling Stone continues to investigate. Here, Rolling Stone contacted more than 50 Tonight Show employees, past and present, during the reporting for this story. After reaching out to representatives for Fallon and NBC, Rolling Stone reached out to an additional 30 current and former staffers. While many of them praised Fallon's immense talent and comedic gifts, not a single one agreed to speak on record or had any positive things to say about working on The Tonight Show. Nor would any of the program's 9 showrunners since 2014 comment about the program's namesake on record, that's Jimmy Fallon himself. They wouldn't even give statements of support, as is common in the entertainment industry. Now, this is pretty significant because not only are you contacting an additional 80 people, the 50 current employees and the 30 former employees, but not a single one of them is willing to speak out and say good things about the work environment or Jimmy Fallon himself. They're really just saying that he's funny and he's talented and he brings the show together, but they're not saying that he's not problematic, erratic, drunk on set, according to this report, yelling at employees, belittling them in front of other people, such that the dressing rooms became a place where employees would go and cry, and so on and so forth. Not a single one was willing to deny that. And not only were they not willing to deny that, almost none of them were willing to go on record having said good things about Jimmy Fallon, including the 9 showrunners that have left over the past 9 years. And a big part of this issue is probably the fact that Jimmy Fallon, much like many, many celebrities once you get to this extremely high status, had a yes man issue. Nobody told Jimmy no, the report says. Everybody walked on eggshells, especially showrunners who apparently got fired or left pretty consistently, 99 years, remember? Another former employee says, you never knew which Jimmy you were going to get and when he was going to throw a hissy fit. Look how many showrunners went so quickly. We know they didn't last long. The part where he says you never know which Jimmy you're going to get is referring to what employees called good Jimmy and bad Jimmy, in which Jimmy Fallon would have good days and bad days. And if he had a good day, everything was fine. You could go about your job normally. But if he was having a bad day, you would have to be very cautious about what you said, because apparently he would be erratic, he would yell, he would verbally abuse the employees, and so on and so forth. And it just really all depended on what kind of a mood he was in, much like an 8-year-old. Now, the Rolling Stone, when they wrote this article, they did reach out to Jimmy Fallon's team and to NBC, who owns the Jimmy Fallon show. And that is a very respectable thing to do, because that's part of reporting. Every story has 2 sides, so it's good that when you have a side that appears to be bad, that you give the other side an opportunity to defend themselves or refute or explain, or tell them what lies there might be. So the fact that they did this, it speaks to their journalistic integrity. However, not only did the representatives of Jimmy Fallon not get back to the Rolling Stone, NBC actually did get back to them, but we'll talk about that in just a second. However, but as this article was going to break, the representatives, we can see right here, they did not comment on the record for the story. After this report published, however, Fallon apologized to his staffers in an all-hands Zoom call. It's embarrassing and I feel so bad, Jimmy Fallon said, according to 2 people that were on the call. I'm so sorry if I embarrassed you, your friends, and family. I feel so bad I can't even tell you. And then NBC went on to talk to the Rolling Stone representatives that reached out to them and said, in a statement, a spokesperson for NBC defended the program, but notably did not mention Jimmy Fallon himself. We are incredibly proud of The Tonight Show, and providing a respectful working environment is a top priority, the spokesperson said. As in any workplace, we have had employees raise issues, and those have been investigated and action has been taken where appropriate. As is always the case, we encourage employees who feel they have experienced or observed behavior inconsistent with our policies to report their concerns so that we may address them accordingly. Now, for those of you that are looking at that and thinking that's a real PR nothing burger of a statement, that's not a bug, it's a feature. With PR, your objective is to defend the company. But in doing so, you can't lie or say anything that might be brought up in court. So if NBC had said, no, Jerry was a horrible drunkard, and left the show, or we fired him because he was a drunkard, and now he's coming back and trying to smear us. You can't say that kind of thing, because then Jerry might file a lawsuit against you alleging you were defaming his character, a defamation lawsuit. So you have to be very careful about what you say, because you don't want a single thing that you say to be brought up in court. And because of that, you get these big nothing burgers of statements where they don't talk about Jimmy Fallon, but say, oh, the show exists and we try to keep it respectful, and if things come up, we try and address them as best we can. That way, if it's ever brought up in court, you can say, well, I never said that we actually did address them as best we could. We said we tried. We made a good faith effort to do so. And almost no judge is going to punish you for a supposed good faith effort as long as you've got everything documented. That's what PR exists to do, to make sure nothing too bad happens, but also very specifically making sure they don't say anything that might be used in a court of law. However, the fact that Jimmy Fallon apologized basically without any prompting, with only knowing that the Rolling Stone was coming out with a negative article about him and the workplace that he had helped foster, it really does beg the question. Did he know what he was doing? Probably he was aware that he had good days and bad days, as we all do. But it is a question worth asking. Like, you could argue that he might have just been ignorant, willfully ignorant possibly, or maybe he just didn't really care. Maybe he was naive and he was good sometimes and bad sometimes. He was the rich celebrity. Why would anyone care? But of course, there's a possibility it was malicious and he was upset with people sometimes and took it out on them intentionally. But there is a distinct possibility he did not know because nobody told him, or he just didn't really care because he had a show to run. Now, it is worth noting that in this article from People magazine, that many of the employees said that they brought up the issues that they were having to HR at NBC, and basically nothing was ever done about it. But also what's worth noting is that after this Rolling Stone article released, suddenly several employees came forward saying what a great guy Jimmy Fallon was. A current employee of the show who spoke with People magazine described Jimmy Fallon as super communicative, and a really, really positive guy. All of these employees coming forward to say nice things about Jimmy Fallon conveniently only did so after the Rolling Stone had looked through 80 people trying to find someone to say something nice, including the 9 aforementioned showrunners, and could not find anyone. But then, once the article drops and things are looking pretty bad for Jimmy Fallon and the PR that he's getting from the Rolling Stone, suddenly employees are coming forward, and that is a little suspicious. But I also want to take this opportunity to kind of zoom out, because we're seeing on a consistent basis late night show environments becoming toxic places. We saw it with James Corden, although he was toxic for a while. We saw it with Ellen DeGeneres when the pandemic came along and she fired everyone so that she wouldn't have to pay them because they were unionized. We saw it with the Kelly Clarkson show, although by and large people defended Kelly Clarkson herself, saying that she was good, but rather the show and the environment around her was incredibly toxic and people really hated it. But whatever the reason that it is happening or on the rise or maybe just being exposed for the first time, we can't deny that it is happening or on the rise or maybe just being exposed for the first time. And I think there's 2 big reasons that late night television working environments are becoming so toxic. And the first one, and I hate this one because I sound like a boomer, it is social media. We consume more social media than basically we ever have at any other point in history. And so in order to keep up with this, these late night shows, which would run maybe once a week, now have to have so much more stuff happening in order to maintain relevancy. If they have one funny quote that goes viral, it might go viral for like 1 to 4 days, at the absolute most 4 days. So they have to have lots and lots and lots of funny moments to keep pumping these algorithms full of funny things, which puts a tremendous amount of pressure on the writers to be able to keep writing jokes that will go viral over and over and over. And as our scrolling habits in our feeds become more diluted with these late night talk show host moments, you have to have better and better ones more often and more consistently. And so to that end, you have to get your writers to keep writing more and more and more. The more we consume, the more they have to write. And it's a kind of a vicious cycle. And the second main reason is market saturation, because lots and lots of people really want to be writers. Probably every writer in existence wants to be on one of these shows. If you're a professional writer looking to write for TV or movies, then to be on the Jimmy Fallon Show is kind of top dog. That is the dream job, to write for The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon. But if lots of people want a job, but there aren't a lot of positions for that job, then if something about the job is not to your liking, you are far less likely to make a stink about it because you're very easily replaceable. When I was in college, I worked at Burger King, and at the time, it was a tiny town, and there was basically nobody that was willing to work at Burger King. And as a result, I got vacation days pretty much whenever I requested them, because it's not like they could fire me because they didn't have anyone to replace me with. In that instance, I had a lot of power because I could essentially do what I wanted. But then look at an industry like acting or writing. Well, there's lots and lots of people that want to be actors and writers, but there's not nearly enough big name roles in order to get there. So if something's bad or abusive, or a producer is taking advantage of you or having you do sexual favors in order to get a role, you're far less likely to report that, because this is the dream. This is what you have worked so hard for, and the moment you become an inconvenience, just like that, you can be replaced by someone who is less of an inconvenience. And there is no shortage of people who want these big top roles and are willing to do whatever it takes to get them. And it's like that for writing. It gets bad, but unless it gets like horrendously bad, you're so much less likely to stand up, because if you raise a stink, cause a problem, you're at will employed. In the United States, that means you can be fired for whatever reason or no reason at all. As long as it's not a protected status, you can just be kicked off. And one of hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of other writers who are very good and talented writers can be hired on in a heartbeat in order to replace you. So why would you take the risk? Now, talking through all of this, it's obvious what the problem is. So, of course, that begs the question, well, what's the solution? And I can tell you, I don't know. I'm just a guy in a bedroom making videos on his phone to about 60 or 70 subscribers. I don't have any solutions. I don't even have enough money for a new phone. But I think we can all agree that there is a problem and there does need to be a change. And we need to figure out what that change is. Thanks for watching.